Hello, I'm Mike Mullen. I'm Vice Chancellor and Dean for the Division of Academic and Student Affairs. Today I want to talk a little bit about tuition and fees at NC State University. First, I want to talk a little bit about the process by which we actually set tuition and fees here at NC State. Secondly, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the university's budget so that you can see where tuition and fees fit into the overall budget of NC State University. And third, we'll spend some time talking a little bit about what our fees are in relation to our peer institutions, and also a little bit of information about where your fees are spent here at NC State. First, I'd like to take a few minutes just to explain to you how we determine tuition and fees here at NC State. Tuition and fee rates are determined through a relatively complex and lengthy process. There is a tuition review advisory committee co-chaired by the provost and the student body president that develops recommendations on in-state and out-of-state tuition increases. The student fee review committee is co-chaired by the vice chancellor and dean of academic and student affairs and the student senate president. First, let's discuss the tuition rate setting process. The committee meets through September to develop a recommendation for in-state and out-of-state tuition for undergraduate and graduate students. That recommendation is sent to the Chancellor in late September or early October. A conference committee of the co-chairs for the tuition review and fee review committees and the Chancellor then formulates a single tuition and fee recommendation, which is then forwarded to NC State Board of Trustees for consideration in November. After approval by the Board of Trustees, the recommendation is sent to the President of the University of North Carolina System. The President then forwards the recommendation to the UNC Board of Governors in December for consideration at their February meeting. After the Board of Governors approves the recommendation, this is included in the budget request for the UNC system, which will then be considered by the state legislature when they set the state budget in May or June. If approved, then those rates are in place for the upcoming academic year. The student fee process is more complex and takes about a year and a half to complete. Fee-supported units spend a great deal of time in late fall and early spring semesters determining what their budgetary needs will be for the future academic years. These recommendations are then evaluated by the University Budget Office to ensure that the requests are reasonable and that the fees have been spent appropriately by that unit in the past. The Budget Office provides a complete summary of the fee requests and the past fee expenditures to the Student Fee Review Committee in August. The Fee Review Committee works through September to evaluate the fee requests in preparation for developing a recommendation to the Chancellor. In late September or early October, the Student Senate considers the fee requests and submits their recommendation via the Student Senate President to the committee. In early October, the Student Fee Review Committee finalizes its recommendations and forwards them to the Chancellor. The Conference Committee then formulates a single tuition and fee recommendation, which is then forwarded to the system as described previously. The Student Fee Review Committee has 9 voting members. There are 4 student votes on that committee: the Student Senate President, the Graduate Student Association President, the Student Body President, and an at-large student. The Student Senate President will vote in accordance with the Senate recommendation at the final deliberations for student fee recommendations. Next, I'd like to talk just a few minutes about the budget here at NC State University. NC State had a budget of $1.35 billion during the 2013-14 year. This slide shows the source of our funding. We received state appropriations of $476 million, $292 million in grants and contracts, $252 million was collected from students in tuition and fees, and another $210 million was derived from sales and services through a variety of university programs as departments. As you can see, about 19% of the total budget for NC State is derived from tuition and fees paid by students. The classroom teaching and student support functions of the university are funded primarily, but not solely, through state appropriations and tuition and fees. Using that as a guideline, then, tuition and fee revenues account for about 35% of the total amount spent on your education. If we look at our budget as a function of what the funds were spent for, you can see that $410 million, or 30% of our budget, was spent on instruction, and another $113 million, or 8% of our budget, was spent on academic and student support program and initiatives. Your tuition and fees of $252 million account for about 48% of that total. North Carolina State is a research-extensive university, and we also have as part of our mission to provide a wide array of public services through agricultural and industrial extension and outreach activities. You can see that about 28% of our budget goes towards those activities. Our auxiliary budgets include dining, housing, and the bookstore, and these accounted for about 11% of our budget last year. Next, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about your tuition and fees, the rates that you pay here at NC State for both in-state and out-of-state undergraduate and graduate tuition. I'd like to show you where your tuition and fees rank versus our other peer institutions, including University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you about where your fee money particularly is spent here at NC State. Let's take a look at NC State's undergraduate tuition and fees in comparison with our 16 peer institutions. Universities choose a cohort of peer institutions who are either comparable to us or who are our aspirational peers. I have also included tuition and fees for UNC Chapel Hill for comparison. It should be noted that the definition of fees varies from state to state. Some items we classify as fees would either be included in tuition or state appropriations elsewhere. Looking at this data, you can see that NC State is a very good value. We are third from the bottom of this list in terms of total in-state tuition and fees at $8,296 a year, ahead of only Iowa State and the University of Florida. Looking at tuition only, you can see that we are also third from the bottom, ahead of only Texas A&M and the University of Florida. When inspecting our student fees, you can see that we are actually the 7th highest school with fees this year of $2,258. However, remember that fees are assessed differently in different states. And if you are wondering about the difference between North Carolina State and UNC Chapel Hill, it is primarily related to indebtedness fees for the new Tally Student Union. Finally, if you look at our tuition and fees for undergraduate out-of-state students, NC State is still an exceptional value. We are second from the bottom in total tuition and fees for out-of-state students relative to our peers and UNC Chapel Hill. Only Iowa State has lower total tuition and fees for out-of-state students than NC State. Now let's take a look at graduate student tuition and fees. NC State is also a great value here. Our in-state graduate tuition and fees is third lowest, trailed only by Texas A&M and Iowa State. And NC State is the 4th least expensive school on this list for out-of-state graduate students, ahead of only Michigan State, Iowa State, and Texas A&M. Now that we've taken a look at tuition and fees at NC State in relation to our peer institutions, let's take a closer look at student fees here at NC State. Student fees are used to support activities, programs, and facilities not paid for through tuition or state appropriations. In general, fees are not assessed to cover purely academic programs and activities. The primary exception to this is the educational and technology fee, which directly supports classroom and laboratory instructional needs and technology needs that serve all students, such as wireless access. You can see that the single largest category is for indebtedness fees. These are fees that pay for the construction or renovation of student support buildings on campus. Of course, the most visible example of where indebtedness fees are being spent is for the new Tally Student Union. Other examples include recent renovations and expansions of the Carmichael Recreation Buildings and the Student Health Service Facility. For more information on each of these fees, I invite you to visit the Tuition and Fees page on the cashier's website. Well, I hope you found this short video to be instructive and useful in your own understanding of how the tuition and fee process works at NC State, a little bit about how your tuition and fees fit into the overall university budget picture, and a little bit about how tuition and fees here at NC State compare with other universities around the country. I hope that you have found this information to be useful. If you would like more information on tuition and fees at NC State University, I invite you to visit the NC State Cashiers page. Thank you for your time, and go Pack!